Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the Field Sales 2.0, so safe face-to-face selling during a pandemic. I am Stefan Hubert, the training manager here at Skynamo, and we'll have a couple of guest speakers in today that will be guiding us through the health and safety protocols on the COVID-19 pandemic that we are all currently in. And you will also remember her from the previous webinar that we did earlier this year, Dr. Marina Clarke will be taking us through that. You will currently see on your screen there is a poll that is launched. So please take your time, read through those questions. And while we wait for all the attendees to join us, you can answer those questions, Sivan. Thank you. While we wait for that to happen, just some housekeeping from my side. So Julian, you can go next slide. So at the bottom of your screens, you will see two buttons. Firstly, there would be a Q&A. That is what we'll be using for getting questions from your end today. So as the presentation goes on, as Dr. Clarke and our other speaker will be going through their slides, if you have any questions, please push them through on the Q&A. Those will be visible to all the attendees. And we're also making use of the upvote system. So at the end of the session today, we'll choose the top 5 questions, and Dr. Clarke and Stan will be answering those questions for us as we go. The other questions that we do not get to will still be included in our guide, which we will be making available to everyone. The second option at the bottom is a little speech bubble. That is the chat feature. And in that feature, use that for any comments that you want to make, but let's try and keep the questions in the Q&A. Next slide. So as mentioned earlier, so the two speakers, firstly, Dr. Marina Clarke, as you would remember from our COVID webinar that we did earlier this year. And secondly, we have Stan Deek, the general manager from our Atlanta, USA branch. Stan Deek is a Georgia Tech grad and has more than 20 years experience in business-to-business technology, with a focus on building and developing early-stage sales as a service companies. He was most recently the head of sales and operation for Inwigo and VP of business development for Experience, which were acquired by Cox Enterprises in 2014. What we'll be covering today in this webinar is basically just selling face-to-face during COVID-19, the benefits and the best practices of it. So firstly, just taking you through all the benefits and details, the physical risks that are associated with that, any mental and emotional risks, how you can minimize these risks, and then also clarifying some practical issues that are related to that. Please note that the details of the risk and mitigating factors that we covered in the initial webinar in June will not be repeated during this webinar. All right, over to you, Stan.
Great, thanks, Stefan, for the introduction, and good morning to anybody here in the States with me, and good afternoon to everybody in Europe and Africa who's joining us. Before we kick off and I hand things over to Dr. Clarke, I just want to provide everybody with a quick overview of Skynamo and then focus a little bit on the importance of field sales. So first, a quick rundown and background on Skynamo. We are a SaaS organization, and we make a product that is designed specifically for manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors. We have roughly 1,000 customers globally, and those customers use Skynamo to manage roughly 3 million customer relationships, where those organizations, whether again it's a manufacturer, field rep, or a distributor field rep, there's 3 million customers that are being serviced by our customers, where they're out using Skynamo on site to manage the workflow, take orders, whatever that might be. You can see the types of customers that we work with across the bottom. Skynamo is a great technology for all types of organizations, whether it's large enterprises like a PepsiCo or Liqui Moly, or even some what I would call more boutique brands like a Tarquin's Gin out of the UK. Next slide, Julian. The Skynamo platform is, again, it's a technology platform designed specifically for field sales reps and organizations that employ field sales reps. So if you think about the product, there's a few key components, and just starting from the top right and going clockwise, Skydymo is a mobile-first technology designed to be used in the field. So it's a mobile app. It has a desktop component and a web component as well, but it's really designed to be easy to use. It's designed to be used offline, and it's designed to really be something that enhances the sales rep's ability to optimize their day. Skydymo can be seamlessly integrated with many different ERP packages. We have custom integrations with some of the top ERP systems that are used internationally. We also have some prepackaged integrations with different CRM systems, so that where the Skydymo platform really lives is at the center between CRM and ERP. I mentioned the web. Oh, if we can go back just one part. The sales analysis component is really for the managers. So if you think about, you have sales reps out in the field and they're doing their jobs, the management portal is really where managers have the opportunity to understand what's happening in the field, see how their reps are performing, see how their best stores are performing, see how their best products are performing. And so it's not just managing workflow, but it's really managing the team and managing the business. And Skydymo gives you the opportunity to do all of those things. On the back end, we have a great training team led by Stefan, who's been our introduction, leading our introduction today. The product itself is extremely secure. So if you're thinking about leveraging Skydymo, or if you're using a third-party technology and you're wondering, in these times around the security of the data, Skydymo is ISO 27001 certified. And then, lastly, we're here to make sure that our customers succeed. When somebody comes on board with Skydymo, we don't succeed unless our customers succeed. And so we have dedicated customer success teams, services teams, product teams, et cetera, that are here to make sure that, our customers are successful in servicing their customers. So let's talk just a minute before we hand things over about the importance of face-to-face selling. So, especially in a world like today, where a lot of businesses are uncertain as to whether or not face-to-face selling is right for their business, and again, internationally and even geographically here in the States, there are different protocols. There's different sentiments around whether or not face-to-face selling is right for certain businesses. But I think it's important just to recognize that field selling and in-person selling is critically important to the overall success of the business. Historically, we've seen that field sales results in a 30% higher close rate. So you're going to win just in aggregate more business, and you're also going to win bigger business. So if you're out selling in person versus over the phone or via text or via email or WhatsApp or whatever it might be, that you're going to also be selling not just more deals, but you're going to be selling more across those deals. So leading in aggregate to more business and in volume to more revenue and products. So we know that face-to-face selling is incredibly important, and it creates a competitive advantage when in times like today, your competitors might not actually be out selling in the field. So we did some recent polls. This is some of our own data, and we know that from our own customer feedback, what we've heard and prospect feedback as well, is that this rings true still. If you look at the results of this data, 63% of people that we've polled or people that we've spoken with have said that face is in fact still creating a higher volume of sales. I think the key stat on this is actually the 9% at the bottom, saying that only 9% of folks would say that face-to-face selling is not important, right? So I think the key stat here is face-to-face selling is leading to a significantly higher volume in sales. And we'll continue to see that hold true, I'm sure, as things go forward. Now, a little bit less tangible and more subjective is the value of face-to-face selling in terms of the effectiveness, right? So it's hard to measure the value of something, but what we're looking for here is definitely face-to-face selling is more valuable. People see it, perceive it as being something that is a genuine differentiator. When you're out talking to your customers, you have the opportunity to meet with your customers, and you have the opportunity to just create that personal relationship with customers as well. So why is that important, right? So when you look at what managers say, and not just individual sales reps, when you look, if you're a manager, you're a business owner, you're responsible for a team and the success of that team, it is historically and through today still relevant, that 85% of managers and business owners feel that face-to-face selling builds stronger and more meaningful business relationships. And I think we can all probably agree that that's true. And why are you able to do that? And I think, you know, Dr. Clarke's going to touch quite a bit on this and how this is changing or being modified in today's world of COVID, when there's social distancing and or you might be wearing a mask during a meeting or something like that. But face-to-face selling gives you the ability to read body language, gives you the ability to read facial expressions, it gives you the ability to hear the tonal inflections in somebody's voice. And you can't always read tone into an email, but you can definitely, you know, decipher tone in somebody's voice. And so, you know, developing relationships, hearing how somebody is answering a question is extremely important. And then also just the ability to bond with somebody. You can have those little, how you doing? How's the sports team doing? Whatever that might be. Those social engagements, social interactions are also still incredibly important. So it's truly, you know, face-to-face selling is never going to go away. It's a little bit different right now, but it's incredibly important. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Clarke, and she's going to talk about how we can all do this as safely and successfully as possible.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Stan, for taking us through that. So while Dr. Clarke is busy preparing on her side, just some background on Marina. So she was educated in Sweden, England, and South Africa, where Dr. Marina Clarke is a medical professional with more than 50 years of medical and occupational health and safety experience. She was part of the team involved in the nursing care of the world's first set of heart transplants back in 1969. So with her, definitely we are getting a wealth of experience coming in for this presentation, and I really look forward to seeing your content.
It's very good for me to be back with you. Well done. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on the time that it is in your venue. You must have done something right. You are here and you are linked in, and for me, it's very good to be with you again. And my goal today is to share with you how to stay safe and how to be effective in this context of COVID-19. Let us look at, I want to ask you to let us learn what has happened in the Czech Republic. If we look at the example of a country that boasted by saying that they've beaten the virus, but something has gone wrong. Just a few months ago, they were boasting with that and saying that they were the best in COVID in Europe specifically. What had happened in the Czech Republic was that one of their scientists, Peter Ludwig, said that we should wear masks. So what he did is he developed a YouTube video to inform people on exactly what it is masking, face masks would do in trying to control the COVID-19 pandemic. They've done that, and their last death was on the 30th of June. So the same day, on the 30th of June, the government actually celebrated and said, we have beaten this coronavirus. But let us see what the stats are saying. So they started with their pandemic in March, middle of March. 4 weeks later, there was just on 6,000 cases in the Czech Republic. Then a further 10 weeks later, they had 12,000 cases. And please, these are only the reported cases. But on the 1st of July was their first day that they have started to say, let's open the borders, let's have visitors in, and let's return business to normal. Well, it would only took 10 weeks later. Obviously, not everybody dropped their masks, but and all the non-pharmaceutical strategies, like washing your hands and all of that. And it doubled, a little bit more than double in 10 weeks. What happened between September to October, just 4 weeks, it trebled. what has happened in a further 4 weeks, and I've just checked with the stats, there are actually more than 300,000 cases in the Czech Republic. So why do we talk about the Czech Republic? What can we learn? We can learn to stay alert, keep focused, and apply the basics, and you will be safe. And that is what I would like to talk to you about today. Let us look what has happened since the Skynamo webinar that we held on the 4th and 5th of June this year. We had 6.5 million cases registered. Today, it's more than 45 million. It means it's about a 700% increase of cases. And with the death rate from 390,000, it is now nearly 1.2 million. Just to give us an idea that this pandemic is really still on the run. It is not over yet. But there were new insights into treatment, improved recovery rate, where people, they've developed a treatment modalities specifically for those with serious and critical COVID cases. And as we said, that the death rate has actually decreased. They haven't found any treatment to prevent COVID-19 specifically. There are more than 100 research projects trying to develop a vaccine, an effective and a safe vaccine. 3 days ago, on the 27th of October, Russia submitted for emergency approval to the WHO to have their vaccine approved. It is not approved, so there is no vaccine approved by the WHO in the world. There are different projects in the UK, in the US, in China that is on the go, and in its final there are 40 of these trials that is in clinical trials at the moment, and the Oxford trial is in its last phase to see about the safety and efficacy, but they don't know how long it will last, the immunity, and if it will really last long enough to develop herd immunity. But something has happened in that is that research, there is also research in new diagnostic tests, and the beauty is there is now a rapid test available for COVID. A health professional must conduct it, but you can have the results within 15 to 30 minutes. And it is to roll it out will obviously be the other thing. We often think that the cases that are reported are the only cases. In fact, they reckon that between it's actually 5 to 10%. Some people even say higher than the actual cases that we see because of the number of mild cases of COVID. We have seen initial lockdowns in different countries where schools have returned, businesses have returned, some air travel has returned to a different and a lower level and a bit more easy with moving around. But that has only been done because that government has specifically thought and felt that they could cope with the cases of COVID. Their health services can cope, but their economy had to be stimulated. But what we have seen this last few days, I'm sure all of you have seen that and heard about the second and third waves in parts of the world. And restrictions, very strict restrictions, have been reintroduced, perhaps even more so than what it was before. And in the US, in Europe, in Australia, you get hotspot restrictions. In a country like Slovenia, they are going to have a military total 1 month restriction. In Ireland at 6 weeks. But the key thing is that we have seen that they are going to reintroduce that. What I wanted to also just say to you that waves in the parts of the world, research has shown that it's in indoor situations that the greatest infection is taking place, especially when it's poorly ventilated. And also when people, with the lifting of some of the lockdowns, you had people socializing, and in that socializing almost like became laissez-faire and forgot about all the non-pharmaceutical measures to curb it, the spread. 85% of 4 million cases that were included in the study had the following signs and symptoms. Last time when we met, we had quite a number of signs and symptoms, and they still exist, but 85% had body temperatures of 37.8 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, new and continuous dry cough, a dry cough without phlegm, 3 to 4 1-hour bouts in a 24-hour cycle, and a loss or change in smell and taste. Children are different. They've developed signs and symptoms that I'm just going to flash on and read very briefly to you. I will ask Kynema to make this available to you. Usually children have milder disease of COVID-19, and children under the age of 16 seem to be less able to transmit the virus. That has to be confirmed, but the preliminary results are like that. So it's fever, abdominal pain, vomiting, diarrhea, neck pain, rash, red eyes, feeling very tired, red cracked lips, headache, nasal congestion, shortness of breath, and a poor appetite, or a baby, an infant, poor feeding. I'm sharing this with you because in the mornings you need to check to see if there are somebody in your household with signs and symptoms. And that is the reason for checking this with you. The other thing that has come to the fore is this post-COVID syndrome. It is also called long COVID. And the definition that is accepted is of people that are not recovering from COVID for several weeks or months following the start of their signs and symptoms that were suggestive to COVID, whether they tested positive or not. That is very important that we take that in cognizance of that. Post-COVID syndrome, also called long COVID, studies in the US and in the UK revealed that it's about 10% of all the COVID cases. It is marked by lingering symptoms for weeks or months after the initial illness, and it's got persistent symptoms, and it would seem that all of them have got a severe chronic fatigue, joint pain, and that joint is not fixed in one joint. It can go from one joint to the other joint within a day's cycle. Respiratory, cardiac, sight, hearing problems, headaches, loss of smell and taste, as well as you can understand, anxiety, depression, and struggling to think clearly. People, even those with mild symptoms of COVID, can be left with long-lasting health problems. Some things have not changed since our last webinar, and that is the presence of the virus, and it needs constant vigilance. You can't let up. This virus do not go on holiday. It doesn't take a New Year's leave or anything. It's with us, and we need to be constantly vigilant. The risk and the consequences of the infection has been better described, but it is still with us. The risk categories of persons that are more likely to suffer the more serious and the COVID are the elderly and those with comorbidities like type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and obesity. The mitigating mechanisms, which I'm sure you've all have done, otherwise we wouldn't have been participating in this webinar, but it is so important that I need to just touch on them. The frequent correct washing of hands and hand sanitizing. I want you to note that sometimes people just give you a spray of hand sanitizer and they walk on. That is not the correct way. Please review the previous webinar and make sure that you do it correctly. Wearing adequate clean masks in the public, using correct mask etiquette, social physical distancing at 2 meters, I think it's quite a few more feet, reducing outings, try and limit them, avoid larger groups, especially indoors, and especially where there's very little ventilation. Then the cleaning and the sanitizing of surfaces, as we've discussed, the correct cough and sneeze etiquette, and natural ventilation. Rather meet outdoors if you can possibly do that. In Germany, they have now decided on opening all windows, even if it's winter. So let us do that. What they have also found is that if you put articles that you think might be contaminated in the sun, direct sun, within 8-9 minutes, it will destroy the virus. And in winter time, it will take a little bit longer. It will take 15 minutes in the sun. All right, the physical risks of this SARS-CoV virus is a bit, I must go through that with you. This virus is highly infectious. The measles virus is more infectious. And that, to have gotten a vaccine for that, took 6 years to develop. And we are only down 10 months down the road. And this virus currently is spread exponentially. Let me try and illustrate that for you. It is, if you see that one person that is infected, in the norm, they say will infect 1 or 2 or 3 people. I've just got a diagram reflecting the 2, and you will see. So everybody that is infected, if you infect 2 people very quickly, you will infect quite a number. So if you apply that non-pharmaceutical measures, you are going to try and get it to 1. But in fact, to address the pandemic, we will have to infect less than 1. But this COVID virus spread is linked with high-risk events. And you call it also a super spreader event. And I'm sure that you've perhaps heard of that. And what complicates that is that one person in a bar or in a nightclub or in any indoor contained room with a lot of people can infect 80 or more % of that people if they are in that indoors areas for a few hours. And there are actually studies that have confirmed that. So that is the problem. It's not just 1 or 2 or 3. They can infect quite a number of people. Large gatherings indoors is something that COVID is transmitted to a larger event, and that is why you get cluster events of COVID transmission. And somebody has related it to, we look at a forest on fire and we look at the big trees, but we don't look at the kindling that is starting down in little spots that's going to burn the whole forest. So COVID, and specifically now with the year-end functions that is coming up, businesses must be very careful as to how and where do you have your year-end functions. I think of Thanksgiving dinners, I think of Christmas, I think of church services, there are weddings, all of those gatherings, you can list them better than me, because this is a season of functions and we've got to be extremely careful and look at how we can prevent transmission and to not have a super spread of the virus. Families and friends are getting together, and just because you know someone, because somebody is a family member, because somebody you work with them, it's not to say that they are not infectious. Remember, 2 to 3 days before you actually show signs and symptoms, you are already infected. And it is now our responsibility as a public to comply to the measures that we know that works in order to get that multiplier effect to not be in place for us. Then, of course, there's a lot of COVID fatigue at the moment, and that creates complacency. We think it hasn't happened up to now, maybe I can just take a shortcut here. And that is exactly what we should not do. So, you know, COVID is very disruptive. It disrupts us when there's a lockdown. It disrupts us when there's isolation, when there's quarantine on and on, because maybe at work we heard somebody is also in quarantine and then we've got to go into quarantine. And then, of course, the time of recuperation, it disrupts our lives as families at our home level. But it also disrupts the business and the workplace. Many businesses also had to close their doors because of the income that it has affected and disrupted. And of course, it also disrupts our own personal income and our own personal situation. And that brings us to that this COVID-19 has the effect of mental and emotional risks associated with it. Early lockdown studies suggested that up to 45% of adults felt adverse effects on their mental health. Up to 37% showed signs of psychological distress, and up to 70% said that this period has been the most stressful period in all of their careers. And these are people with long careers. Okay. So there is always stress that is linked with this fear of infection. Of course, it leads to anxiety and regarding the possible consequences, because none of us know how our bodies will be affected by this virus. Not one of us can predict that. And it causes this uncertainty and insecurity. If you think of having to wait for your test result, in some countries we have to wait a few days, quite a few days for test results. It must cause so much insecurity and uncertainty. The stresses, it stresses and complicates your relationships, both in personal level and in your business, because you don't know how COVID compliant your client is and how you are and the people that you deal with. And it can be stressful. Also, when you go and visit your family, you haven't seen them for a long time and you are so happy to see them, but you see that perhaps the measures that you know that work is being compromised, and that can be very stressful. And that obviously can lead to depression, especially if you're isolated and haven't got a household that you share with other people. The consequences of the infection, of course, on your family and friends is very difficult. I've put up a poster on stigmatization because we are so easy to treat people who had COVID or who's having COVID in a different light. But if we have an infection or we know about somebody that is infected, it can make us feel guilty or embarrassed, especially if we are the one that has become ill because we did not adhere to it as we had to. We can become angry and resentful. Why did that person not sanitize their hands or not tell us where they've been? We can also become angry and resentful towards the government for lockdowns or a business for closing. We also, of course, may have to face medical bills and medical costs. And if we don't have a medical insurance or the insurance has run out, that can be very, very tough on a family. And then, of course, that we can't get away from is the fear of death. We don't know how it will affect us. And as you know, that visitors may not go and see COVID positive patients in a hospital. It's very difficult. And you also don't know the effect of this will have on your family if you as a breadwinner cannot cope and is sick in hospital. So, and then of course the stigmatization. If I had COVID, how will my business accept me back? How will my colleagues treat me? How will my friends treat me? And I want to tell you that people who had a mild COVID condition will be infection-free within 10 days after the symptoms have started. Those with serious or critical COVID will be should be infectious-free within 20 days. Those with post-COVID long COVID syndrome will be handled on a case-to-case basis, but they would not extend more than 10 days on average being infectious. So these people are not infectious. They won't give you the virus. If we look at our own personal perceptions, we need to know where we are coming from, but we also need to know where our client is. Where are they in terms of COVID compliance? And if you look at this figure 6, you can see that both of them looking at the 6. This person will say it's 6, and the other one from the other side will say it's 9. Are any of them wrong? No, both of them are right. And they are justified to be right because that is how they read it. And that is how we must respect our customer and find out how they see COVID and how do they see COVID compliance, and respect them for that, and also then abide by the rules and fit in with where they are. You must remember that they are fed like you are by experiences, exposure and information. And we've got to find out where they are in that. And we can share with them the knowledge that is accurate and evidence-based. Sometimes people are distorted by prejudice. You would say, oh, those old people will not comply with measures to be taken to curb the transmission, or youngsters. And you would give them that sort of label, and in the meantime, they might even impress you by being better and more COVID compliant. Please, fake news and incorrect information, try and just don't go there. As somebody from PSG has said, let us be hygienic when it comes to information. And I want to ask you to do that. If something doesn't sound right, it's most probably not right. Just stick with what we share with each other that we know is correct. Personal perceptions, of course, affects your own personal boundaries. If you come to your client, a customer, and that customer has had a close scare or heard of somebody in the family that might have tested positive, please, their boundaries would have been more stricter. So comply with that. And that perception will, of course, affect the behavior and the attitude, and also yours. And it may not reflect reality. You may think that that person is over the top with their measurements, but my advice to you is hear what they are saying and comply with that. Then, how to minimize the risks of COVID. This is just going to be 1 second. Focus on the basics. You know the basics. There's the distance. It's the masking, both nose and mouth. And then this is all the cleaning and the sanitization, and avoid large gatherings, especially indoors. Can't say that more than that. Okay, so now we're getting to addressing your perceptions. And you must understand your own prejudices, your own perceptions, and your own biases. And only then can you, in fact, deal with your customers. Avoid the us and them, and find out where people are. Find out where people, if they've had COVID and they're back at work, don't refer to them as them. They are your customer or your colleague. They're not infected. They won't give you the virus anymore. Be vigilant about misinformation. Please remain updated. You can't believe how much has changed this last week. It was like redoing the webinar for you to have it up to date. Trust only reputable sources, because those other sources can only put you into a downward spiral. Don't be gullible, and don't gossip, and don't or spread rumors. And then I want to very importantly ask you not to hide any signs and symptoms. If you hide signs and symptoms, that guilt might come to you and all that anxiety. If you are communicating in this area of masks and you can't touch your people, just touch each other. Communication is the prime tool of your trade to inform, to convince, to support your customer. And if you look at communication, 7%, only 7% is related in terms of words. 33% is in terms of your tone, the way you speak, and 55% in terms of the body. So when you communicate, you will see that the non-verbal communication is complicated by wearing the mask and the distancing and the no touch, but your body language is then 93% of the way that you can communicate. Non-verbal communication is open to interpretation, fair enough, but you need to educate yourself and share with each other what you have found to be that
Excuse me, Dr. Clarke. While we're busy discussing the perceptions, we've got one question coming in now where you mentioned misinformation. and trust only reputable sources. How can one make sure that that source is reliable? Do you have any tips on that, perhaps?
Yes, yes, I do. One can investigate that. First of all, you see what the evidence say, what you know yourself. You go to reputable sites like the World Health Organization, and I like to go to the Communicable Diseases Council of America, the USA, CDC, and there's a wonderful search buttons that you can, in fact, confirm whether your information is accurate and evidence-based or not. And if you don't know, you ask somebody that you trust and get it confirmed either way.
Wonderful, thank you.
The main thing is also to humanize the communication. One must remember that 70% of people prefer to work with people rather than with a robot. And you are not robots. So they want to humanize that way of you dealing with your customers. Even if you email, just a little personal note will be of so much value. And try and remember what the customer said to you last time so that you can follow up if somebody perhaps in the household was sick or something like that. Treat with humility and respect and great sensitivity your customer. And I can promise you, you will also be treated with respect and humility and sensitivity. Maybe they've had a scare in the family or even in the business, somebody that has suffered COVID. Please try not to wear humorous masks, because I can tell you they might know what the mask has said and what the mask transferred to them, but they might have forgotten and not heard what you were trying to tell them about your product. So, and be aware of cultural norms about the eye contact, especially when you wear masks, but also specifically eye contact. In some countries in Africa and in Asia and Central America, you can't make direct eye contact because they find it intimidating and they find that you want to be superior to them. Whereas in Europe, in the US and UK, I am of the opinion that if you don't look people in the eye, they think that you are dishonest. So try and find out the customary effect, especially of the eyes, because remember your eyes and eyebrows are now the way that you need to communicate, because you can't show them your whole face. Your client might be a bit deaf, might need to lip read. You do get masks with a transparent unit over your lips. Try and obtain one or get one made for you, but be sensitive to them. Use expressiveness with your eyes and eyebrows and your forehead and your body as such. And keep your hair out from your eyes and into the mask, and be as open as possible. But then again, masks muffle your words and distorts the tone. So be careful, go and practice it in front of a mirror. I mean, you might say to your customer, I'm saying 500 and he hears 300, and it might be the value. So the customer could also say, you know what, I'm in a hurry today. And you will say, well, curry will be nice for lunch. So check mutual accuracy when you've communicated. Make sure that your customers understood you. Be aware of this muffledness in the mask. Then it is important to touch and also to have that distance. And in fact, the non-pharmaceutical ways of controlling of the transmission has taken away that touch. Touch is the first and the first sense that is developed even intrauterine, and it's the last sense when you are dying. It's a sense that's with you for all your life, and now that is taken away. And also the distance. You know, people like their space, their personal space. And if you take that and compromise that, it is assumed by the customer in a different way. So think of things out of the box, how you're going to deal with this and how you're going to still institute and have that close connection with your people. Distance can also reflect a level of intimacy, but it can also have a level of that you are just very cold. If but to correct it when you are there in the field, you can say to the customer, you know, for the sake of the other staff, maybe we should just move a little bit further apart. Okay, to institute the social distance again. Touch convey that connectedness. We don't have that, so you've got to do something else, and perhaps use a gesture like this, or develop something and then share it with others. But we must also be aware that there are irritating habits, like, for instance, winking or pulling your face or playing with a pen in and out, or tapping your toes or whatever. Try not to do that, because you've got to now encourage your customer to listen to you. They've got to focus and spend more time to hear what you have to say. We are now on a very important part of this webinar, and this is the self-care. It is essential that you care for yourself, because if you don't care for yourself, you can't care for your family and your friends or your customers or your work who employs you. You have to maximize a relationship. You must be at your best in order to maximize a relationship. In self-care, I've got a few things that I would like to deal with. And perhaps just before I go into this list, I would like to ask you that you, especially those in the Northern Hemisphere, maybe you want to consider this year to have a flu shot, just to build you an immunity against the common flu virus. If we take rest and we come to the physical care, when we work at home, we seem to never be off, because the office is in the home, everything is in the home. And I want to encourage you to structure your day so that you have a routine to rest, that you can say, I now work those hours and not those other hours, because, you know, candle has got one side that can light, not two sides, it will burn out. Sleep. Adults need on average 7 hours sleep a night. You need to try, and especially in these lockdowns and isolations, one has got to have that you go to bed more or less the same time. If you are overtired, you might not fall asleep easily, and when you wake up, you are tired. If you, on the other hand, work late, you are so stimulated that you can't switch off and you can't go to sleep, or you wake up in the middle of the night and your mind just goes on and on and on. Sleep is a very important part. If you find that you can't sleep properly and nothing helps you, even if you have regular times of sleeping, please investigate and see if you can talk to somebody about it. Exercise, cardiac exercise that has a little bit of sweat created when you do exercise is the best. 3 to 4 times a week is enough, half an hour at a time, more than enough. And that will give you better memory. It will make your brain much more alive, and you will be able to not be so tired. Nutrition is vitally important. We know that in the world, 10% of the people are type 2 diabetes. That means prior insulin resistant diabetes, type 2, developed usually in the adulthood. Nutrition is important also. If you don't have the correct nutrition, your body can't be fed and can't function properly. And in the nutrition also includes 2 to 3 liters of fluid, still water, every day. I have put here a website, firediabetes.com. I've had personal experience of it where type 2 diabetes can be reversed. And it is a low carb, high fat, especially for diabetics diet. And I've got personal experience of its effectiveness. So maybe you want to look at that for people who are suffering from type 2 diabetes or has an overweight problem. You won't have to count calories ever again. Then emotional and mental, try and do things that stimulate your brain, whether it's Sudoku or whatever the case is, reading. Have fun. Laughing is free. Laughing therapy. Try and relax and work towards being content with what you have and what you are, because contentment also brings you, it will work against anxiety. In terms of the spiritual aspect of life, try and see if you could have times set aside for meditation and just be quiet, religious practice, have reflection, and live in the moment, just so that you can have that restoration in yourself. And then social, maintain relationships with family, friends, and networks. Please make sure that you move in a smaller, manageable group, and make sure to know how compliant they are with COVID regulations. Because rather have a small group that you maintain and develop relationships with than a big group, and you expose yourself and your family to the virus. Obviously, with self-care goes financial control. Many people have got less income and all of that. You've got to budget and you've got to discipline yourself to stay within that guideline. Feel in control by having a daily routine. It will reduce your stress and you will develop healthy habits. When you find that you are in difficulty, when you've got sleep disturbances and that kind of thing, please seek help early. I want to make some suggestion to you building your immune system. I'm saying this to you, you can investigate that, and a Buffett vitamin C, at least 1,000 milligram daily. Buffett means that it will, even if you've got quite a lot of acid, this won't give you more acid like the Zorbic tablet. It will, because it metabolizes in the duodenum, out of the stomach, already in the smallest intestine. And you take that in the morning on an empty tummy, it will work the best. Then 25 milligram elementary zinc supplement will help you. I've just accessed the RCT that says that it will in fact lower your systolic, that high blood pressure. And it builds your immune system. Then vitamin 3, here you must ask your doctor's advice because one needs a blood sample to establish your value of your vitamin D in the blood. And there's a D3 and a D2. The D3 is the better one to have and to increase the vitamin D in your blood. And vitamin D is needed for you specifically for the absorption of calcium and biophosphonates to bone for your skeleton to be strong. And it also builds your immunity.
So Dr. Clarke, question for you about this, because this is the one on vitamin D where I thought all vitamin D was the same. And you've specified D3 here. And so I went and actually Googled it when I was prepping for this. So can you speak just briefly to the differences between vitamin, what people just generically refer to vitamin D versus why you've specified D3 here?
You get D3 and D2. D2 is in the plant, in plant foodstuffs. You will get vitamin D2, and that vitamin is not necessarily going to, the vitamin D2 is not the one that would necessarily address the vitamin D in your blood level. And you want your vitamin D in your blood to be within a specific range in order for your body to use the calcium and the phosphonates that you eat to strengthen your body and your immune system. And the D3 is by far more, it will actually support that. And by the way, vitamin D3, thanks for asking, Stan, you can go into the sun for 15 minutes in a day. You would have exposed just your arms and your face. Please don't overexpose. I don't want you to get skin cancer, but your body will then develop vitamin D3 itself. But it is in countries where there's long, cold winters, or you work indoors and you are not exposed to direct sunlight, you might have a lack of D3, but you can only have that value established by a blood sample.
Great, thanks for that explanation.
Okay. Then vitamin B12, 6 and 3 supplementation. These three, B6, your body do not produce. You must take it in with food stuff, all right? You can overdo vitamin B. So these vitamins will help you with your mood stabilizing, with your cardiac, with breathing, and all of that, and the neurotransmitters of your brain. So that is why I'm at least B12, 6, and 3. Please reduce your sugar intake. Our bodies only need 5 milliliters, which is one teaspoon of sugar in a day. And if you're on a low carb and a high fat diet, and please healthy fats, olive oil and that kind of thing, and fish oils and so forth, your liver will transfer the protein into enough glucose for your body to operate. So that is a very important part of your immune, to build your immune system. Okay, ask your health professional to guide you, because I don't want you to overdo things, and I don't want you to not build your immune system. So please ask your health professional, whether it's a pharmacist, it could be a registered nurse, it could be a doctor, just to guide you on that one. Managing your work stress. Please learn to recognize your symptoms of stress. You know your body, listen to your body. Only you can listen to your body. Build resilience. Resilience is the possibility to carry on and carry on. Build that. And you can build it only if you care for yourself. Take practical steps to organize and reduce your stress. Only you can do that for yourself. And maybe you've got to reduce the activities that you do and prioritize what you must do. Don't wait for burnout or feeling overwhelmed. Please seek help early. There is nothing worse than an athlete that celebrates too soon that they won the race, only to fall just before the end line. We are not through the COVID-19 by a long shot. They reckon that the vaccine might only be available middle of next year. Some people say earlier. Russia is immunizing, but it's not been recognized or registered anywhere in the world. Please keep yourself vigilant of this virus. Just know it doesn't go on holiday. It's always there. And apply the mitigating processes that I've repeated twice today, that you know, that you hear every day of your life. And I want to thank you for taking time to attend this webinar. And I just want to put up a disclaimer and ask you to just read it. And that is the end of my input. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Clarke. While the attendees are reading through that disclaimer, I'm going to launch a second poll just for some closing questions. So it shouldn't take you too long. We're going to give you about 3 minutes to go through this. So just answer those questions. And remember about the Q&A section, we still have our questions coming up on the next slide. So any questions that you might have, please send those through for either Dr. Clarke or to Stan in the Q&A. Thank you.
Cool. So Stefan, can I ask Dr. Clarke a question here while we have the poll going and we have the list of questions, or should we wait just a moment?
I think you can go for it. Yeah.
So Dr. Clarke, we didn't actually practice this one, so I apologize for putting you on the spot, but I think this is a one that I often think about. I'm somebody who routinely went to the gym, and I had a routine, I had a workout, and you talk about the value of a routine, and then you also talk about the value of exercise. And when we're thinking about the changes to routine, particularly exercise, and the impact of exercise and sleep together, right? I often find, and I think many people would agree, that when I exercise, I sleep better. And when I don't exercise, I have a much more difficult time sleeping. And could you just speak to the combination of exercise and sleep and routine and how valuable that is, or how negative it might be when you can't have that routine and you don't get that sleep on your immune system and your ability to resist a disease or even recover if you happen to get sick?
First of all, sleep is very important because it recovers your body. And we often think that we can do without sleep or with less sleep, or how little sleep can we do. One of our sons said once when he was at varsity, he said to me, "Why is the sun not shining at night when we all want to be awake?" Because you must sleep. Okay, so we need to rest and sleep, because that is how our bodies recuperate. Exercise is best in the morning because it gets your cardiac system going, and it is the best to exercise in the morning. And also a routine. If you have a routine and you keep to that routine, you've got a system in your brain that is the cycle of keeping the time of your body. And that is what is all factored in to, and the main thing is to be in balance, not to overdo exercise. I know we can't really go to gyms at the moment. I think gyms are in most countries still in lockdown. But you will have to take a step and make if you don't have a step in the house or outside the house, you make a step. You do some exercise 3 to 4 times a week, and you will actually benefit. Professor Suzuki, if you look on the TED Talks, speak about exercise and how it in fact changes and renews brain cells, and it gives you better memory and more clarity of thinking. So I would encourage you. Thank you, Stan, for that question.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks. Wonderful.
So, Dr. Clarke, the first question that we have here is from an anonymous attendee, and they just want your inputs on would you advise the use of probiotics?
Yes, yes, definitely, but not ongoing. Just do it from time, skip a month and then you do it for a week or two again. But yes, and ask your pharmacy to guide you on that, because most probiotics needs to be taken in between meals and not with a meal in order to get it to work most effectively. For instance, 2 hours for if you had a lunch and you're going to have dinner, have your probiotic in the middle of the afternoon. That will work better. Yes.
Wonderful. And then the final question that we have here, someone wants to know that, is it true that you are immune if you have already tested positive in the past?
For COVID, I take it?
For COVID.
Yes. At the moment, in fact, a study came out of the US this week that said at maximum 5 months, you may be immune against it. But there's also the study that says you can be reinfected with COVID just after you've had COVID. So the best is to, and especially for the field staff, when they go to their customers, is to feel as if they are positive in the way they deal with anybody that they come in touch with. But unfortunately, the immunity is still a great discussion. There are some, of course, there are people that develop antibodies, and they are using those plasma for to give to very serious patients to see if they can't get their bodies then to develop their antibodies. But it doesn't last longer than 5 months, it would seem. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Looks like the same with the flu vaccine. It only lasts 4 to 6 months. That's why we must go annually. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it looks like that's all the questions that we have for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and thank you for taking the time, Dr. Clarke and Stan, to join us for this webinar. Remember, we will be sharing all the content and a recording of this session, both on the Skynamo Academy, and we will also share links to that to all the registered users. Thanks, everyone, and have a lovely weekend.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.